I want to lead this firm. I've been running 3 of your most complex accounts simultaneously. I've built the client relationships that are keeping this firm's revenue intact. I know this business better than anyone sitting in this room.
This has to be a joke.
Claire, we appreciate the ambition. The timing just isn't. We'll be in touch.
Thank you for your time.
The laughter was the part she never forgot. Not the rejection. Not the email that came 4 days later with its careful corporate language and its hollow suggestion to reapply when a more suitable position becomes available. Not even the look on Richard Holt's face when he slid her application across the table and said, without lowering his voice, "This has to be a joke." It was the laughter. 7 people in that boardroom. 7 people who had watched her work for 6 years. 6 years of early mornings and late nights. 6 years of fixing problems that were never officially her job. 6 years of results that somehow always carried someone else's name on the final report. And when she sat down at that table and said she wanted to lead, they laughed. Not politely. Not quietly. They laughed the way people laugh when something is so far outside their imagination that the only response their brain can produce is noise. Her name was Claire Donovan. And in exactly 93 days from that meeting, every single person in that room would be answering to her. To understand what happened in that boardroom, you have to understand who Claire was before she ever walked through the doors of Hartwell and Associates. She grew up in a modest apartment on the edge of a city that had never quite decided whether it was growing or shrinking. Her mother worked 2 jobs. Her father had left when Claire was 9, not dramatically, not with a scene. He had simply stopped coming home, the way some men do, as if family were a subscription they decided not to renew. What her father's absence gave Claire, without meaning to, was this, an absolute refusal to wait for anyone else to decide her future. She put herself through university on scholarships and part-time work. She studied business and finance, graduated in the top 4% of her class, and sent out 41 applications before she got a single interview. Hartwell and Associates called her back on a Tuesday. The role was junior analyst. Entry level. The salary was modest and the office was in a building that smelled faintly of old carpet and ambition. But Claire said yes without hesitating, because she had learned early that the right door rarely looks impressive from the outside. For the first 2 years, she kept her head down and worked. She learned the business from the floor up, not just her department, but all of them. She stayed late to understand how operations connected to finance. She came in on weekends to map out client patterns that no one had bothered to document. She asked questions that made senior staff uncomfortable because the questions were too precise, too revealing. Her direct manager at the time was a man named Gerald Park. Gerald was competent, pleasant, and deeply threatened by anyone who worked harder than he did. He managed Claire the way insecure people always manage talent, by keeping it just close enough to benefit from it, and just far enough away to prevent it from outgrowing him. Claire's reports became Gerald's presentations. Claire's client insights became Gerald's strategies. Claire's late nights became Gerald's quarterly bonuses. She knew it. She watched it happen with clear eyes and said nothing, because she was still learning, and Gerald, without realizing it, was teaching her exactly how power moved inside Hartwell and Associates. By year 3 she had moved to senior analyst, a promotion that came not from Gerald's recommendation but from a client, a major account named Stanton Global, who had specifically requested her by name for their quarterly review. The managing partners noticed. Gerald did not recover from it professionally, though he would spend the next 2 years pretending otherwise. By year 5, Claire was running 3 of the firm's most complex accounts simultaneously, managing a small informal team that everyone acknowledged but no one had officially named. She was, in every functional sense, a director already. She had the results. She had the relationships. She had the institutional knowledge. What she did not have was the title. Or the salary. Or the seat at the table. She raised it once with her assigned mentor, a senior partner named Diane Walsh, who listened carefully, nodded slowly, and said, "Claire, you're doing incredible work. The timing just has to be right." The timing. Claire had heard variations of this sentence for 2 years. The timing. The pipeline. The budget cycle. The restructuring. There was always something standing between her and the acknowledgement of what she had already built. So when the Director of Strategy position was posted internally, a role that had, for all practical purposes, been shaped around the work Claire was already doing, she decided she was done waiting for the timing to be right. She applied. She prepared for 3 weeks. She built a 40-page strategic review of the firm's current positioning, with 3-year projections and a detailed plan for 2 untapped revenue verticals she had identified. She rehearsed her presentation until it was seamless. She walked into that boardroom with 6 years of results behind her and a document in her hand that any serious business mind would have recognized immediately as exceptional. Richard Holt, the firm's COO and the man running the selection panel, glanced at her application for approximately 45 seconds. Then he looked up. Then he looked at the panel. And then he laughed. This has to be a joke. The others followed. Not all of them, 2 people in that room, Claire would later remember, did not laugh. One stared at the table. One looked directly at her with something that might have been an apology. But the rest of them, they laughed. Claire gathered her documents. She stood up. She said, calmly and without any tremor in her voice, "Thank you for your time." And she walked out. The rejection email arrived on a Thursday. It was 4 paragraphs long and had clearly been written by someone in HR who had never met Claire personally. It used phrases like "incredibly competitive pool of candidates" and "we will keep your application on file," the kind of language designed to soften a blow while simultaneously making the recipient feel as though the blow was somehow their fault for standing in the wrong place. The position was given to a man named Marcus Webb. Marcus Webb had been with the firm for 14 months. He had come from a competitor with strong references, a confident handshake, and a talent for speaking in meetings with the kind of assured authority that some people mistake for competence. He was not incompetent. He was simply not Claire. He had not built what she had built. He did not know what she knew. He had not earned, through 6 years of invisible labor, the institutional weight she carried. But he had the title now. And Claire was still senior analyst. The Monday after the appointment was announced, something shifted in the office. Not dramatically, offices rarely shift dramatically. It was subtle. The way people's eyes moved when Claire walked into a room. The slightly too cheerful greetings from colleagues who felt guilty about something they weren't directly responsible for. The way Marcus Webb set up his new office, the corner office, the one with the large window that looked over the city, with the quiet confidence of a man who had no idea how much he didn't know. He introduced himself to Claire's informal team as their new director. He mispronounced the name of Stanton Global's primary contact, a client Claire had personally cultivated for 3 years, in the first team meeting. He asked Claire, in front of the group, to bring him up to speed on the account basics. She did. Professionally. Without expression. That afternoon, Diane Walsh stopped by Claire's desk with a coffee she hadn't asked for and the body language of someone delivering condolences. "I want you to know," Diane said carefully, "that your work here is valued. This decision was about optics more than merit. I think you know that." "I know," Claire said. "I hope you'll stay. The firm needs you." "I know that too," Claire said. What Claire did not say, what she had already decided the night before, sitting at her kitchen table with a glass of water and a very clear head, was that she was not staying. She had spent 6 years building value inside a structure that was never going to give her what she had earned. She had confused loyalty with safety, and results with leverage. She understood now that the two were not the same thing. She had 3 things that Hartwell and Associates could not replace easily: the trust of their most valuable clients, 6 years of institutional knowledge, and a 40-page strategic document that contained, among other things, a detailed analysis of 2 revenue verticals the firm had completely missed. She began making calls that evening. Not to competitors. Not to headhunters. Not to anyone who might have been predictable. She called an old university contact named James Osei, who ran a small but well-capitalized private investment group. They had stayed loosely in touch over the years, the occasional message, a coffee when schedules aligned. James had asked her twice in the past 3 years if she was ready to do something of her own. She had said not yet, both times. This time she said, "Tell me what you need to see." Beat 4, The Quiet Shift, 20:00, 32:00. What happened over the next 60 days was quiet. That was the thing nobody inside Hartwell and Associates understood until it was too late, how quiet it all was. There was no spectacle. No resignation letter designed to make a point. No whisper campaign or deliberate undermining. Claire came to work every morning, did her job with the same precision she always had, answered Marcus Webb's questions with the same professional calm, and gave nothing away. But outside the office, she was building. James Osei's investment group had the capital. What they needed was a strategic operator, someone who could identify an acquisition target, map out a viable entry, and run the business with enough expertise to justify the risk. Claire had brought him the 40-page document. She had also brought him 3 years of client relationship data, 2 revenue models built on genuine market intelligence, and a clarity of vision that James later told a colleague he had only encountered twice in his professional life. "She didn't come to me with a dream," he said. "She came with a plan." The acquisition target they identified was a mid-sized consultancy firm called Meridian Group. Meridian had strong infrastructure, a respected name, and a leadership problem. Its founders were aging out, their succession plan had stalled, and 2 of their senior partners had quietly been testing the market for buyers for nearly 8 months. The firm was not failing. But it was drifting. And drifting firms, in the right hands, become something else entirely. James's group opened preliminary conversations with Meridian's board in week 3. By week 6, a term sheet was in progress. During all of this, Claire was still at her desk at Hartwell and Associates. Still sending reports. Still handling client calls. Still helping Marcus Webb understand accounts he had been handed and not earned. Marcus, for his part, was struggling in ways he was not yet willing to acknowledge. The Stanton Global relationship had become strained, the client had been warm to Claire for years and were finding Marcus's style disconnected from the way the relationship had been built. 2 other key accounts had made quiet inquiries about their account management structure. Richard Holt had called a private meeting with Marcus in week 5 that lasted 90 minutes and left Marcus visibly shaken. None of this surprised Claire. She had predicted it in the document she had brought to the boardroom and been laughed out of. Pages 11 through 14, Client Retention Risk Under a Non-Organic Leadership Transition. She had written it as a warning. It had turned out to be a forecast. In week 7, she submitted her resignation. She did it in writing. Professionally worded. 2 weeks' notice as required. No drama. No explanation beyond the standard language. Richard Holt called her into his office within the hour. He sat across from her with the careful composure of a man recalculating something. "I'd like to understand what's driving this," he said. "I found an opportunity that aligns better with my goals," Claire said. "Is there something we can do to address that here?" She looked at him. She thought about the boardroom. She thought about the laughter. "No," she said. "I don't think there is." He tried twice more over her notice period, once through Diane Walsh, once through a formal counteroffer that included, with remarkable irony, the title of Director of Strategy. The title that had been given, 14 months ago, to someone else. She declined both times. Her last day was a Friday. Her colleagues organized a small send-off. Marcus Webb shook her hand and told her she'd been a pleasure to work with. She thanked him and meant none of it and showed none of that. She walked out of the building at 5:47 p.m. The acquisition of Meridian Group closed 3 weeks later. The press release went out on a Tuesday morning. It was a standard announcement, the business publication, a brief item about a private equity acquisition of Meridian Group, a few lines about the new leadership structure. The kind of item that most people skim and forget. Inside Hartwell and Associates, no one skimmed it. Because the name listed as the incoming CEO of Meridian Group, the firm that had just been repositioned as a direct competitor to Hartwell in two of their core service verticals, was Claire Donovan. The reaction, by all accounts, moved through the office in under 12 minutes. Richard Holt read the release at his desk and sat very still for a long time. Diane Walsh forwarded it to her assistant with no comment. Marcus Webb, who had just taken his morning coffee into the corner office with the large window, put the coffee down and did not pick it up again. Several people who had been in that boardroom 18 months ago, who had laughed, or watched others laugh, or sat quietly and said nothing, spent that morning in a private reckoning they would not discuss openly but would not entirely forget either. The call started coming in that afternoon. Not from inside the firm, from the market. From clients. From contacts. From the kinds of people who track these announcements and understand immediately what they mean. Stanton Global reached out to Claire directly within 48 hours. Their primary contact, the one Marcus Webb had mispronounced in his first team meeting, was warm and direct. "We want to continue the relationship," he said. "We were hoping it would come to something like this." He was not the only one. Over the next 3 weeks, two of Hartwell's top-tier accounts formally moved their business to Meridian. A third requested a meeting that everyone on both sides understood was a prelude to the same decision. Inside Hartwell, the post-mortem was both predictable and painful. Marcus Webb was moved from Director of Strategy to a newly created advisory role, the kind of title that sounds important and means nothing. Richard Holt commissioned an internal review of their client retention structure. The review, ironically, identified the same vulnerabilities Claire had documented in the 40-page report she had submitted with her application, the one he had looked at for 45 seconds before laughing. The firm was not destroyed. It survived. But it was diminished. And it was diminished in precisely the ways that Claire had predicted, and precisely because of the decision that Richard Holt had made in that boardroom on an ordinary afternoon when he had looked at 6 years of results and decided they were a joke. Claire's first full week as CEO of Meridian Group was, by external appearances, unremarkable. She came in early. She learned the building. She introduced herself to staff at every level, not in a town hall, not through a company-wide email, but personally, floor by floor, department by department. She asked questions. She listened. She made notes. On Friday afternoon she held a leadership meeting. She presented a 12-month strategy. It was detailed, grounded, and visionary in the specific way that only someone who has spent years watching a market from the inside can be visionary. When the meeting ended, her new CFO, a man with 20 years of experience who had been skeptical of her appointment and was now quietly revising that position, said to a colleague on his way out, "She's going to be something." He was not the first person to recognize it. He was simply the latest in a long line of people who had not recognized it early enough. Months later, a journalist writing a profile on Meridian Group's rapid growth asked Claire about Hartwell and Associates. About the application. About the boardroom. She considered the question for a moment. "I learned something in that room," she said finally. "Not about them. About myself." "What did you learn?" "That I had been asking for permission," she said. "And that the right people never need to ask." The journalist asked if she had any feelings toward the people who had laughed. Claire thought about this for a long time. "No," she said. "They did me the greatest favor of my career." She paused. When someone shows you the ceiling they've put over your life, you stop renovating the room. You build somewhere else. Some people spend years trying to convince others of their value. Claire Donovan spent 93 days proving it on her own terms.
This has to be a joke.
The boardroom that laughed became
Claire,
the
we appreciate
competition
the
she
ambition.
surpassed.
The timing just isn't.
The title they denied her became the
Thank you for
company
your
she
time.
owned. She never asked
This
for an
has to be a
apology.
joke.
She never needed one.
Claire, we appreciate the